My name is Pamela Davis, 32 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I thought presenting my marketing campaign to Lawrence Anderson's son was my big career break. Now, as I sit across from Bradley Anderson trying to maintain my professional smile, my phone buzzes with a message from an unknown number. Don't react. He's recording you. Be careful what you say. My hands tremble slightly, but I keep my composure. Something about his too perfect smile suddenly feels sinister. If you are watching this from your office right now, drop a comment telling me where you are. Make sure to like and subscribe to see how I manage this corporate nightmare. Trust me, what happened next completely transformed my career. Growing up in Chicago's middle-class South Shore neighborhood, I never imagined I'd be sitting in the corner office of one of America's premier marketing firms, presenting to the heir apparent of Anderson and Burke. My parents, a school teacher and a city bus driver, had emphasized education as the ticket to a better life. I was the first in my family to attend college, working 2 jobs to supplement my partial scholarship at Northwestern University. Those years taught me perseverance and resourcefulness, qualities that served me well when I landed an internship at Anderson and Burke 7 years ago. I started in the mailroom, essentially running coffee and organizing presentation materials, but I studied everything, absorbed every conversation, and stayed late reading client briefs that weren't technically my business. Within 6 months, I had pitched an idea that caught a junior manager's attention. Within 3 years, I was managing my own small accounts. Now, as senior marketing executive, I had earned my place through sheer determination and creative thinking. My reputation at Anderson and Burke was built on honesty and a straightforward approach. I didn't play politics, didn't engage in office gossip, and let my campaigns speak for themselves. My recent success with the Wilson Sporting Goods account had finally caught the attention of Lawrence Anderson himself, who had personally congratulated me at the quarterly review. That validation felt like the culmination of everything I had worked for. Anderson and Burke wasn't just any marketing firm. With clients ranging from luxury automakers to international fashion houses, we were the agency everyone wanted to work with and everyone wanted to work for. But beneath the glossy exterior of awards and champagne celebrations lay an intensely competitive environment. 14-hour days were standard. Weekend work was expected during campaign launches. I had seen talented people burn out their ambition, consumed by the constant pressure to outperform. Recently, there had been mysterious departures that didn't quite add up. Sarah Thompson, our digital strategy genius, had abruptly resigned, despite having just purchased a condo and mentioning her 5-year plan with the company only days before. Marcus Chen, our brilliant numbers guy from accounting, who partnered with creative on budgeting, had supposedly accepted a position elsewhere without even serving his notice period. The official explanations sounded rehearsed, and the rumors of internal power struggles grew louder in their absence. Lawrence Anderson remained something of an enigma to most employees. The founder and visionary behind the company rarely involved himself in day-to-day operations anymore, instead focusing on high-level strategy and maintaining relationships with our biggest clients. His management style was distant but fair, and his occasional appearances in the creative department were treated like royal visits. I had only spoken to him directly 3 times in 7 years, but each time he had remembered my name and specific details about my work which impressed me. His relationship with his son Bradley, however, was the subject of much office speculation. Bradley had been appointed Vice President of Strategic Development 6 months ago, despite having limited practical experience beyond his Harvard MBA. At 35, he had worked briefly at a competitor before his father created this new position seemingly just for him. The whispers suggested Lawrence was grooming his son to eventually take over, though many questioned whether Bradley had earned the right. My limited interactions with Bradley before today had been carefully neutral. He was undeniably charming with clients, all white teeth and confident handshakes. But with employees, particularly those below executive level, he maintained a cold professionalism that bordered on dismissive. There were rumors about his methods, about how he took credit for others' ideas and blamed failures on his subordinates. Some claimed he kept detailed notes on everyone's mistakes, building cases against people he wanted removed. I had dismissed these as typical office paranoia until today. The project that had led to this meeting was potentially company-changing. A luxury electric car manufacturer was launching in America and wanted a campaign that would position them as both exclusive and environmentally conscious. The potential contract was worth over $50 million, making it the biggest account in our company's history. My innovative social media strategy, involving micro-influencers and immersive digital experiences, had impressed the initial client team, and somehow my presentation had made its way to Bradley's desk. For weeks I had prepared researching every aspect of the luxury car market, environmental consumer psychology, and digital engagement metrics. I had worked late nights, refining the presentation, anticipating every possible question. Success could fast-track my promotion to creative director, a position I had been working toward since day one. Failure could relegate me to mid-level management indefinitely. When Bradley's assistant Jessica had called to schedule this one-on-one meeting, I was initially thrilled. Then came the unusual stipulations: no team members, no assistants, just me and him in his corner office, discussing the future of the campaign. It struck me as odd, but I rationalized it as his way of giving the project his undivided attention. Walking into Bradley's office that afternoon, I was immediately struck by the atmosphere he had cultivated. Unlike his father's warm, book-lined workspace, Bradley's corner office was aggressively impressive. Awards and certificates covered one wall, expensive. Abstract art dominated another. The furniture was ultra-modern, all sharp angles and brushed steel. The entire space seemed designed to intimidate rather than welcome. "Pamela, fantastic to see you." Bradley greeted me with a too-wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. His handshake was firm to the point of discomfort. "I have been looking forward to this. Your campaign concept has potential." The slight pause before the compliment felt deliberate, immediately putting me on uneven footing. The first 15 minutes had seemed productive. Bradley asked intelligent questions about target demographics and conversion strategies. He nodded at appropriate moments and appeared to take notes on his tablet. In retrospect, the meeting had been carefully choreographed to build a false sense of security before he began his real agenda. I had been so focused on impressing him that I failed to notice the subtle signs that something wasn't right. That would change the moment my phone vibrated with that anonymous warning. The sleek conference room table in Bradley's office reflected the afternoon light as he launched into what I would later recognize as a rehearsed monologue about his vision for the company. My presentation materials lay nearly forgotten between us, as he spoke about disruption and paradigm shifts using MBA buzzwords that sounded impressive but said little. I was nodding politely, mentally calculating how to redirect the conversation back to my campaign when my phone vibrated against the table. Normally, I would never check messages during such an important meeting, but Bradley had just turned to gesture at something on his wall display, giving me a moment of privacy. I discreetly glanced down, expecting a text from my assistant about the afternoon client call we had scheduled. Instead, an unknown number displayed a message that sent ice through my veins. "Don't react. He's recording you. Be careful what you say." Years of maintaining professional composure in difficult client situations served me well in that moment. I managed to slide my phone face down without changing my expression, though my heart hammered against my ribs with such force I feared Bradley might hear it. When he turned back to me, I offered the same attentive smile I had maintained throughout, though it now felt like a brittle mask that might crack at any moment. "So, what I envision is a more aggressive approach than what you've outlined," Bradley continued, apparently noticing nothing amiss. "I think we need to position ourselves as thought leaders in this space." "That's an interesting perspective," I replied, my voice remarkably steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "I would love to hear more specific thoughts on how that might complement the research-based strategy I've developed." As Bradley resumed talking, my mind raced at lightning speed. Who sent this text? How did they know what was happening in this meeting? Was this some kind of prank or a legitimate warning? If Bradley was recording me, what was he hoping to capture? I mentally reviewed everything I had said so far, searching for anything that could be misconstrued or edited to sound problematic. My crisis communication training from a professional development course last year kicked in automatically. Rule 1, never panic. Rule 2, assume everything you say could become public. Rule 3, when in doubt, redirect to established facts and data. I began choosing my words with surgical precision, avoiding any commentary that could be construed as criticism of company policies or leadership. When Bradley asked what I thought about the recent restructuring of the digital department, I redirected. "The data shows our digital conversions have remained strong through the transition," I said, rather than sharing my actual concerns about the hasty reorganization. I am focused on maintaining that momentum with this campaign. When he asked about my weekend plans, fishing for personal details I might normally share with a colleague, I kept my answer brief and immediately pivoted back to campaign metrics. Personal questions that had seemed friendly 15 minutes ago now felt like potential traps. I found myself controlling not just my words but my body language, conscious that video recording might capture crossed arms or a skeptical expression. I maintained open posture and neutral expressions, drawing on every presentation skill I had developed over the years. While appearing to admire a modern sculpture on his credenza, I scanned the room for recording devices. His phone sat on the table, positioned at an odd angle that could potentially capture our conversation. An unusual silver pen on the table between us looked out of place among his otherwise minimalist accessories. Could it contain a recording device? I had read about such things but dismissed them as spy movie props rather than corporate reality. Most telling was his insistence that I sit in a specific chair facing the bookshelf rather than the one I had initially started to take. The bookshelf held few actual books, but numerous small decorative objects that could easily conceal a camera. The portrait of his father hanging behind his desk could also potentially hide recording equipment. As our conversation continued, Bradley's behavior began to strike me as increasingly suspicious. What I had initially interpreted as normal interview-style questions now seemed carefully calculated to elicit specific responses. "Between us," he said with artificial casualness, "what do you really think about the senior management approach to the Westfield account?" My father can be rather old-fashioned in his thinking. The question was a minefield. Criticizing the CEO to his son would be professional suicide under normal circumstances. With the possibility of being recorded, it felt like being asked to pull the pin on a grenade and hold it. "I think the established relationship your father has built with Westfield gives us a strong foundation," I replied diplomatically. "Their trust in our company allows us to propose innovative approaches while respecting their brand heritage." A flash of something, perhaps frustration, crossed Bradley's face before his smile returned. "But surely you must have suggestions for improvement, areas where we could be more cutting edge." "I believe in continuous improvement across all our processes," I said, maintaining eye contact despite my internal alarm. "That's why each campaign I develop incorporates lessons from previous work while pushing boundaries in strategic areas." He made notes with unusual deliberation, as if performing the act of note-taking rather than actually recording information. Each time I gave a diplomatic answer, he would pause slightly too long, waiting for me to fill the silence with additional, potentially less guarded comments. It was a classic interview technique, one I recognized from my own client research sessions. As the meeting continued, Bradley increasingly diverted our discussion away from my campaign and toward controversial topics within the company. The missed revenue targets last quarter, the departure of our chief financial officer, the rumored acquisition of a smaller competitor. With each new topic, he seemed to be fishing for opinions that could be construed as disloyal or unprofessional. The certainty that something was deeply wrong grew within me with each passing minute. What had begun as a career opportunity was rapidly transforming into a dangerous game I hadn't agreed to play. The tension in the room was palpable as I carefully navigated his leading questions while trying to appear natural and unaware. My professional training had prepared me for difficult clients, tough negotiations, and high-pressure presentations. Nothing had prepared me for the realization that a company executive might be secretly recording me with potentially malicious intent. Yet I maintained my composure, a fixed smile, and careful responses as the minutes ticked by on Bradley's ostentatious desk clock, waiting for an opportunity to safely extract myself from what increasingly felt like a carefully laid trap. 10 minutes after the first message, my phone vibrated again. Bradley was reviewing some figures from my presentation, giving me a brief moment to glance discreetly at the screen. The same unknown number had sent another text. "He's done this before. Got Sarah fired last month. He edits recordings to make people sound disloyal." The mention of Sarah sent a chill through me. Sarah Thompson had been a digital marketing genius responsible for some of our most innovative campaigns. Her sudden departure had shocked everyone, especially since she had just been praising the company at the office happy hour the week before. The official story was that she had accepted a position with a startup, but she had never posted about a new job on LinkedIn, and her farewell email had sounded strangely formal and impersonal. Other mysterious departures suddenly made more sense. Marcus from accounting, who had supposedly left for a competitor without notice. Alicia from legal, who had cleaned out her desk on a Tuesday afternoon and never returned. Thomas from client relations, who had allegedly decided to pursue other opportunities after 7 successful years with the firm. The pieces were beginning to fit together into a disturbing pattern. Had they all sat in this same chair facing these same leading questions, unaware they were being recorded and manipulated? Pamela Bradley's voice pulled me back to the present. Is something wrong? Not at all, I said smoothly, slipping my phone into my pocket. I was just considering how to address the concerns you raised about market penetration in the luxury segment. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. Good. Because I value your full attention. This is important for your future with the company. The subtle threat in his words was unmistakable now that I was alert to it. Would you excuse me for just a moment? I asked, standing up. I need to use the restroom quickly. Bradley looked annoyed, but gestured toward his private bathroom. Use mine. It's right through that door. We have a lot more to discuss. Actually, I have some materials in my office I think would address your questions about demographic targeting. I will just grab those and use the restroom on the way. 5 minutes tops. Before he could object, I was out the door, walking briskly down the hallway toward the women's restroom, my mind racing. Once safely inside a stall, I tried calling the mysterious number. It went straight to voicemail, with no personalized greeting. I texted back. Who is this? How do you know what's happening? The response came quickly, friend. Just trust me. I've seen his pattern. I hesitated, then sent another message. Why are you helping me? Because what he's doing is wrong. You're not the first, won't be the last. I quickly searched online for recording laws in our state, confirming what I vaguely remembered: we were in a 2-party consent state, meaning it was illegal to record conversations without the knowledge and permission of all parties involved. If Bradley was recording me without my consent, he was potentially breaking the law. After splashing cold water on my face and taking several deep breaths, I grabbed a random marketing report from my office and headed back to Bradley's lair, my mind now operating with crystal clarity, despite the adrenaline. When I returned, Bradley's demeanor had shifted subtly. The artificial warmth had cooled, replaced by an impatience that manifested in drumming fingers and tighter lips. That took longer than 5 minutes, he said, checking his watch pointedly. I apologize. I wanted to make sure I had the complete demographic breakdown for the luxury market segment. I slid the report across the table, a prop in what I now recognized as a high-stakes performance. Bradley barely glanced at the document. Let's move on. I want to discuss your thoughts on our current leadership structure. Direct and to the point now. No more pretense of interest in my campaign. What specific aspects of the leadership structure are you curious about? I asked, projecting innocent professional interest. Do you think the current senior management team is effectively guiding the company through digital transformation? Be honest, Pamela. This is just between us. I noticed he had shifted his phone slightly on the table, angling it more directly toward me. I think any organization faces challenges during periods of significant change, I replied carefully. Our leadership team has established a strong foundation that allows for innovation while maintaining the core values that make Anderson and Burke successful. Bradley's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That sounds like a prepared statement, Pamela. I'm asking for your real opinion. Do you think my father and his old guard are holding us back from more aggressive growth? The trap was so obvious now that I knew what to look for. He wanted me to criticize Lawrence Anderson on a recording that could be edited and presented out of context. I have tremendous respect for your father's vision, I said firmly. His experience has guided this company through multiple market shifts successfully. I believe the blend of established wisdom and new perspectives creates the most sustainable path forward. Bradley checked his phone with unusual interest, as if confirming something was working properly. Each time I evaded his attempts to extract criticism, his questions became more pointed, and his tone more condescending. Your campaign presentation was interesting, but somewhat conventional, he said dismissively, clearly changing tactics. I was expecting more innovation from someone with your reputation. The comment was designed to provoke defensiveness or insecurity emotions that might lead me to speak less guardedly. Instead, I nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate that perspective. Innovation takes many forms, and I focused my approach on strategies with proven ROI, while incorporating emerging technologies where they align with our clients' brand values. I would be happy to explore more experimental approaches if that's the direction you feel would better serve the client. His eyes narrowed slightly at my measured response. I could almost see him recalculating his approach. You made a minor error in the projection figures for the third quarter, he said, referencing a slide from my presentation. Not a major issue, but attention to detail is critical at your level. There was no error. I had triple-checked those numbers. This was pure intimidation, an attempt to destabilize me emotionally. Thank you for pointing that out, I said, with professional humility. I would appreciate seeing where the discrepancy lies so I can correct it immediately. He waved his hand dismissively. We can address that later. I'm more interested in your thoughts on the restructuring of the creative department. And so it continued a chess match of questions designed to elicit damaging responses and my increasingly aware deflections. The afternoon sun cast lengthening shadows across the office as our verbal sparring stretched into the early evening. The ticking of the modernist clock on his wall marked each tense minute. Bradley's assistant Jessica peeked in once, only to be abruptly dismissed with a harshness that seemed to confirm everything the text had suggested about his character. But not before I noticed her nervous glance in my direction, a look that contained what seemed like warning, or perhaps sympathy. "Will you need dinner?" ordered Mr. Anderson, she had asked timidly. "I didn't ask for an interruption," he snapped. "Close the door on your way out." As Jessica retreated, I noted how her shoulders hunched slightly, her body language speaking volumes about the daily reality of working directly for Bradley Anderson. In that moment, the office felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in on what was becoming the most stressful meeting of my professional life. As our meeting approached the 2-hour mark, Bradley's statements began revealing troubling inconsistencies that might have gone unnoticed had I not been hyper-alert to manipulation. He referenced marketing budget allocations that contradicted figures presented at last week's department meeting. He described his father's 5-year vision for the company in terms that seemed at odds with Lawrence Anderson's public statements about maintaining our boutique approach rather than aggressive expansion. Most concerning, Bradley claimed authority over decisions I knew fell under Chief Marketing Officer Diana Reed's purview, including staff assignments and vendor relationships. When he casually mentioned necessary restructuring in the creative department, alarm bells rang loudly in my mind. No restructuring had been announced or even hinted at in official channels. "We need to streamline operations," he said, with the casual air of someone discussing lunch options rather than people's livelihoods. Some of the more traditional team members may need to transition out to make room for forward-thinking talent. The implication was clear: those who didn't align with Bradley's vision, regardless of their performance or contribution, were at risk. It explained the exodus of experienced staff over recent months and painted a disturbing picture of Bradley's methodical consolidation of power. "Of course, loyalty to the company vision is paramount during transition periods," he added, studying my reaction closely. I nodded noncommittally. Continuity and innovation both have their place in successful transitions. Before he could press further, Jessica entered again, this time, without knocking, carrying a silver tray with coffee service. Bradley's irritation at the interruption was palpable. "I apologize for interrupting," Jessica said, her voice carefully neutral, though her hands trembled slightly as she arranged cups on Bradley's desk. "I thought you might need refreshments for your extended meeting." "We didn't request coffee," Bradley said coldly. "The kitchen was closing, sir." It was now or never. Jessica's eyes met mine briefly as she spoke, and I detected something deliberate in her glance. As she poured coffee, she casually mentioned, "Pamela, I believe you have the conference call with Tokyo scheduled for 6:30. Would you like me to reschedule it?" There was no Tokyo call. I had reviewed my calendar thoroughly that morning, knowing this meeting was my only major commitment. Jessica was creating an escape route for me. "Thank you for the reminder," I said, playing along. "I should be finished here in time, but perhaps have the materials ready in case we need to adjust." Bradley dismissed Jessica with a curt nod, his tone unnecessarily harsh. "That will be all, and next time wait to be called." The moment the door closed, my phone vibrated with another text. "Check Company Policy Handbook Section 5.3 about recordings." I remembered Section 5.3 clearly from our annual compliance training. It explicitly prohibited unauthorized recording of company meetings or conversations, establishing it as grounds for immediate termination. The policy had been implemented after a competitor had attempted to obtain proprietary information through a temporary employee last year. The message continued. He got Sarah with edited comments about leadership. Made Marcus sound like he was sharing financial data inappropriately. 3 others before them. A pattern was emerging more calculated and sinister than typical office politics. Bradley wasn't just difficult or ambitious. He was systematically removing perceived obstacles to his control, creating evidence to justify terminations that served his personal agenda. I thought back to conversations with Sarah before her departure. She had mentioned a weird meeting with Bradley, where he had asked for her honest assessment of the digital marketing leadership. A week later, she was gone. Marcus had similarly mentioned being questioned about financial projections in ways that made him uncomfortable, feeling pressured to criticize decisions made by the finance department. The more I reflected, the more examples surfaced. Jenna from HR had raised concerns about Bradley's interview techniques before suddenly accepting a position with a nonprofit. Paul from business development had questioned Bradley's approach to client acquisition in a meeting only to be passed over for promotion despite his stellar performance record. The systematic nature of Bradley's approach was becoming clear. He targeted competent professionals who might challenge his authority or vision, particularly those with strong relationships with his father or other executives. He created justification for removing them through manipulated evidence, then replaced them with his own allies, often Harvard connections who owed their positions to him. Bradley leaned forward, interrupting my thoughts. "Let me be direct, Pamela. Your department might face significant budget cuts in the coming quarter unless we can demonstrate exceptional performance. Your position specifically is being evaluated." The threat was barely veiled, particularly in light of what I now understood about his methods. "That's valuable context," I replied calmly. "I am confident in my team's contribution to company revenue and client retention. The metrics speak for themselves." "Metrics can be interpreted in different ways," he countered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your recent Wilson campaign generated press, but was it truly innovative or just flashy?" He was attempting to undermine my confidence to create an emotional response that might lead to unguarded comments. I recognized the tactic from negotiation training: destabilize your opponent emotionally to gain advantage. "The client's 30% increase in market share following our campaign speaks to its effectiveness," I responded. "I welcome any specific feedback that could strengthen future work." His frustration flickered briefly across his face before he changed tactics again. "How would you handle it? If we needed to reduce your team by 20%, who would you let go first?" Another trap. If I named specific team members, he could use those comments against me, later portraying me as disloyal to my own staff. "I would need to review current projects, client relationships, and skill sets to make such a determination," I said. "Any restructuring should be based on business needs and performance data, rather than personal factors." As Bradley continued pressing with increasingly manipulative questions, I found myself in an internal crisis. My career at Anderson & Burke represented 7 years of dedication and sacrifice. I had canceled vacations for urgent client needs, worked through weekends and holidays, and poured my creative energy into building our brand reputation. The thought of losing it all because I had become a target in Bradley's power games filled me with both fear and fury. My mortgage payment, student loans, and my mother's medical bills flashed through my mind. The practical reality of potential unemployment added a layer of anxiety to an already stressful situation. Yet beneath that very real concern burned a growing anger at being manipulated and targeted, at watching a company I respected being corrupted by internal politics. As Bradley continued his questioning, I began formulating a counterplan. If he was creating evidence against me, perhaps I needed to protect myself with evidence of my own. The realization that I might outsmart him at his own game sparked a sense of clarity and purpose that cut through my anxiety. I was not just going to survive this meeting, I was going to turn the tables. After nearly 3 hours of circling conversation, Bradley apparently decided it was time for his closing move. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair, steepling his fingers in a gesture that seemed practiced rather than natural, and fixed me with what he clearly intended to be a penetrating gaze. "Pamela, I appreciate your thorough presentation and our wide-ranging discussion," he began in a tone of artificial sincerity. Before we conclude, I would like your honest opinion on something important. The moment felt choreographed, as if he had been building toward this specific question all afternoon. His hand moved casually toward his phone, adjusting its position slightly on the table. What do you really think of my father's leadership style? His decision-making has been more conservative lately. Between us, do you think he's still the right person to guide this company through digital transformation? The question was the equivalent of a professional hand grenade with the pin removed. Criticizing the CEO to his son would be career suicide under normal circumstances. With the knowledge that I was likely being recorded, it was an obvious trap designed to generate evidence of disloyalty. This is just between us, Bradley added with an unconvincing smile. I value your perspective as someone on the front lines of our client relationships. He leaned back, his hand hovering near his phone, ready to capture whatever career-ending statement he hoped I might make. The afternoon sun cast his face in sharp relief, highlighting the expectant gleam in his eyes. In that moment, I made my decision. I would neither lie to protect myself, nor take his bait. Instead, I would find a third path. I have had the privilege of watching your father build this agency from a respected regional player to a national powerhouse. I began choosing each word with deliberate care. His vision established our reputation for creative excellence while maintaining financial discipline, a balance many agencies struggle to achieve. Bradley's expression remained neutral, waiting for the but that would lead me into dangerous territory. What I particularly admire is his ability to evolve his approach as the market changes. I continued. He recognized the digital shift early and invested accordingly, while competitors were still clinging to traditional media models. I leaned forward slightly, projecting sincerity and engagement. I believe the most effective leadership combines wisdom from experience with openness to innovation. Your father exemplifies that combination, and I see that same potential in the next generation of leadership. The compliment to both Andersons was calibrated to be unimpeachable, even if recorded, while the emphasis on wisdom from experience subtly highlighted what Bradley lacked. That sounds very diplomatic, Bradley said, his grip tightening on his pen. But surely you must have observed areas where his traditional approach limits our growth potential. Every leadership style has strengths and opportunities for enhancement, I acknowledged. The sign of a truly great organization is one where different perspectives complement each other. Your strategic vision could certainly complement your father's established approach, creating a more comprehensive leadership perspective. By suggesting he could complement, rather than replace his father's leadership, I was subtly challenging his apparent desire to undermine Lawrence Anderson while maintaining a positive, constructive tone that would be difficult to edit into something damaging. Bradley began interrupting me more frequently, his frustration becoming evident as I continued to navigate his verbal traps. His questions became less artful and more direct, his tone more aggressive. Do you think we need to move faster on digital integration? He pressed. I believe in thoughtful implementation that balances innovation with proven strategies, I responded. Is the senior leadership team too resistant to change? He tried again. Different perspectives on change management strengthen our approach to market evolution, I countered. With each exchange, I could see his mask slipping further. The charming, interested executive was vanishing, replaced by an increasingly frustrated inquisitor, unable to extract the damaging quotes he sought. As our verbal chess match intensified, my phone vibrated with another message. I waited for an appropriate moment to glance at it discreetly. This is Marcus. He did the same to me. I have proof. Be careful. The revelation that Marcus was my anonymous ally sent a surge of validation through me. Marcus Kelly had been respected throughout the company for his financial acumen and integrity. If Bradley had targeted him, it confirmed my worst suspicions about the systematic nature of these manipulations. More importantly, Marcus's mention of proof suggested there might be evidence of Bradley's unethical tactics, evidence that could potentially stop this pattern of targeted removals. The knowledge that I wasn't alone, that others had recognized and potentially documented what was happening, gave me a renewed sense of resolve. Bradley, apparently tired of subtlety, shifted to direct accusation. I'm concerned you're not being entirely forthcoming, Pamela. In a position of your seniority, I expect honesty and transparency. I value honesty and transparency as well, I replied evenly. They're foundational to effective professional relationships. Your recent success seems to have made you somewhat difficult to work with. he suggested, his tone now openly condescending. Several colleagues have mentioned concerns about collaboration. This was a blatant fabrication. My 360-degree feedback consistently highlighted team collaboration as a strength. He was throwing random accusations, hoping something would provoke an emotional response. I appreciate you sharing that perception, I said, maintaining eye contact. Specific feedback is always valuable for professional growth. I would welcome the opportunity to address any concrete concerns with the colleagues in question. His eyes narrowed at my measured response. I'm beginning to think we may need to reconsider your role in the luxury car campaign. Perhaps it requires someone more aligned with our future direction. The threat was explicit now, the pretense of a collaborative discussion entirely abandoned. We had reached the crisis point, the moment where I needed to decide whether to capitulate to save my position or stand my ground on principle. I took a deep breath, centering myself before responding. In that moment of clarity, I realized that regardless of the outcome of this meeting, I could not continue working in an environment where such manipulation was the path to advancement. The decision to neither surrender nor attack, but instead to strategically redirect, solidified in my mind. I understand your perspective, I said calmly. Before we make any decisions about the campaign leadership, I believe we should review the client feedback on the initial presentation and the market research supporting my proposed approach. Data-driven decisions align with Anderson and Burke's commitment to measurable results. Bradley's face flushed slightly at having his authority questioned, however diplomatically. I could see the internal calculation happening behind his eyes, weighing whether to escalate further or retreat temporarily. In that moment of tension, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows across his office, I made my decision to take control of the situation, rather than remaining on the defensive. A strange calm settled over me as I shifted from defensive responses to strategic offense. Years of client negotiations had taught me that the person asking the questions controls the conversation. It was time to change the dynamic. Bradley, before we discuss the campaign further, I have a question about company protocols, I said conversationally, as if the thought had just occurred to me. I was reviewing some workplace law updates for a client project last week and came across interesting information about recording conversations in professional settings. His hand, which had been reaching for his coffee cup, paused momentarily before continuing the motion. To an untrained eye, the hesitation would have been imperceptible, but I had spent my career studying micro-expressions for consumer research. The brief freeze confirmed what the text had suggested. Our state requires all-party consent for recordings, I continued casually. I believe Anderson and Burke's Policy Handbook Section 5.3 addresses this, specifically prohibiting unauthorized recordings of meetings or conversations. It was implemented after that incident with the competitor last year, right? Bradley's expression remained neutral, but a slight tightening around his eyes betrayed his discomfort. Company policy is quite clear on a range of professional conduct issues, he said dismissively. But that's hardly relevant to our discussion about your campaign. Actually, transparency and ethical conduct are relevant to all aspects of our work, I replied with a pleasant smile. It builds the trust necessary for creative risk-taking and innovation. I placed my phone deliberately on the table screen up. In the spirit of transparency, I always prefer having everything on the record. Would you mind if I recorded our conversation from this point forward? For my notes, of course. As I spoke, I tapped my phone screen as if opening a recording app, though I was actually just opening my calendar. The psychological effect was immediate and telling. Bradley shifted in his chair, the movement betraying his discomfort. That won't be necessary. I'm not sure what prompted this digression, but I've been reading about the concept of two-party consent in recording laws, I continued smoothly. It's fascinating from both a legal and ethical perspective. Did you know that recordings made without proper consent are not only inadmissible as evidence, but could potentially expose the recording party to legal liability? His face flushed slightly as I continued. My phone automatically backs up to cloud storage, including all media files. It's a security feature I activated after losing some client presentations in a device failure last year. Technology is remarkably reliable these days. Bradley's eyes darted briefly to his own phone, which he subtly moved closer to his side of the table. Pamela, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything, I interrupted gently. I'm simply sharing information about best practices for professional communication. Clarity and consent are foundational to ethical business operations. Wouldn't you agree? Without waiting for his response, I continued my strategic pivot. Speaking of clarity, I was saddened by Sarah Thompson's sudden departure last month. Her digital expertise was exceptional. And Marcus Kelly, from accounting his financial insights, were invaluable to our team on campaign budgeting. Both valuable team members whose contributions are deeply missed. Bradley's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. People move on for various reasons. Better opportunities arise. Of course, I nodded. Though it's interesting how many of our experienced team members have moved on after one-on-one meetings with leadership. 7 in the past 4 months by my count. All high performers with strong relationships across the company. All replaced by new hires with connections to Harvard Business School. An interesting pattern. I was laying out the evidence without direct accusation, watching his composure crumble by degrees. Sweat had begun to bead along his hairline despite the perfectly climate-controlled office. "Are you questioning management decisions?" he asked, his tone hardening. "Not at all. I'm observing patterns, which is what marketing executives are trained to do. Patterns help us understand underlying dynamics and anticipate future developments." Before Bradley could respond, his phone rang with an elaborate classical ringtone. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted from annoyance to something approaching alarm. "I need to take this," he said abruptly. He answered with forced cheerfulness. "Father, I'm in the middle of a meeting with Pamela Davis about the luxury car campaign." Lawrence Anderson's voice was faintly audible through the speaker. Bradley's attempt to end the call quickly was unsuccessful, judging by his increasingly strained expression. "Yes, she's still here," Bradley confirmed, looking at me with barely concealed hostility. "I understand, but—" I couldn't hear Lawrence's response, but Bradley's jaw tightened as he listened. "That won't be necessary," Bradley insisted. "We're making good progress on our own." More unintelligible speech from the other end. "Fine," Bradley finally conceded. "We'll see you shortly." He ended the call with visible frustration. "My father is on his way down. He wants to discuss the campaign personally." The shift in power dynamics was palpable. Whatever Bradley had planned for our meeting, his father's unexpected involvement had clearly derailed it. I maintained a pleasant professional expression while inwardly processing this unexpected development. "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "His insights will be valuable." Bradley's phone pinged with a message. His eyes widened slightly as he read it. Then he looked up at me with new wariness. Whatever the message contained, it had clearly altered his perception of our interaction. Less than 5 minutes later, a knock at the door preceded Lawrence Anderson's entrance. At 64, the CEO maintained the commanding presence that had helped build the company from a 3-person operation to an industry leader. His shrewd eyes took in the scene, lingering momentarily on his son's too rigid posture and my carefully neutral expression. "Pamela, always good to see you," Lawrence said warmly, shaking my hand. "Bradley mentioned you have an innovative approach to the luxury electric vehicle campaign. I'd like to hear it directly from you." "I would be happy to walk you through it," I replied, opening my presentation on my tablet. "Before we start," Lawrence continued, "Jessica mentioned there might be some concern about recording protocols. Something about Section 5.3 of the Employee Handbook." Bradley's face paled visibly. Jessica had apparently overheard enough of our conversation to alert Lawrence, or perhaps she had her own suspicions based on previous experience. "There seems to be some confusion," Bradley interjected quickly. "We were discussing general compliance for client interactions, not internal protocols." Lawrence's expression made it clear he wasn't convinced. "Compliance is a priority at all levels of this organization," he said firmly. "I trust my executive team to exemplify our ethical standards, not just enforce them." The pointed look he gave his son spoke volumes about their relationship dynamics. I realized that Lawrence Anderson might be more aware of his son's methods than Bradley assumed. Pamela Lawrence turned to me. "If you have any concerns about our meeting protocols, I encourage you to speak freely. This company was built on integrity and open communication." It was the opening I needed. With measured words and professional calm, I shared my concerns about the pattern of departures following one-on-one meetings, the leading questions designed to elicit damaging statements, and the text warnings I had received. I showed Lawrence the messages from Marcus without naming him as the source. Bradley attempted to dismiss the allegations as misunderstandings and paranoia, but his defense crumbled when I mentioned specific instances of edited recordings used against former employees. Lawrence's expression grew increasingly grave as the full picture emerged. "These are serious allegations," Lawrence said finally. "If recording devices were used without consent, that violates both company policy and state law. I can provide contact information for former employees who might corroborate these experiences I offered, and I believe there may be additional evidence available." Bradley's attempt to portray me as manufacturing conspiracy theories collapsed entirely when Jessica, apparently having overheard the discussion, knocked and entered with a flash drive. "I believe this might be relevant, Mr. Anderson," she said quietly, addressing Lawrence rather than Bradley. "It contains several audio files I was asked to transcribe from Mr. Bradley's meetings. Some sections were marked for extraction and emphasis." The look of betrayal Bradley gave his assistant would have been comical under different circumstances. In that moment, his carefully constructed facade of professional authority crumbled completely. Lawrence accepted the drive with a troubled expression. "Bradley, we need to discuss this privately. Pamela, thank you for your candor. Please wait in my office. I'll join you shortly to review your campaign proposal properly." As I gathered my materials to leave, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: vindication that the truth was emerging, concern for what might follow, and profound relief that I had navigated a potentially career-ending trap. Most of all, I felt a renewed appreciation for integrity in a professional world where it sometimes seemed in short supply. Bradley's cold stare followed me as I left his office, but the power he had wielded over me just hours before had evaporated in the face of exposed truth. Whatever happened next, the pattern of manipulation and fear had been disrupted, and that alone felt like victory. The aftermath unfolded with surprising swiftness. I spent 2 hours in Lawrence Anderson's office, first discussing my campaign proposal with the genuine interest and respect I had hoped for from Bradley, then addressing the troubling pattern of manipulation that had emerged under his son's leadership. Lawrence's shock gave way to controlled anger, then to resolute determination to address the situation. "This company was built on creative excellence and integrity," he told me, gazing out his office window at the city skyline. "I cannot allow anyone, including my son, to compromise those values." By the following morning, Bradley had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. His corner office stood empty, the door locked, the blinds drawn. The official announcement cited administrative review of management protocols, but the office grapevine quickly connected his absence to our extended meeting and Jessica's unexpected involvement. 2 days later, I met Marcus Kelly for coffee at a quiet cafe 3 blocks from the office. The former accounting executive looked both vindicated and wary as he slid into the booth across from me. "I wasn't sure you would come," he said, stirring his Americano absently. "Most people just want to move on after they escape that place." "I appreciate the warning texts," I told him sincerely. "You saved my career, possibly several careers. How did you know what was happening?" Marcus's expression darkened, because he did the same to me. Led me through a seemingly casual conversation about financial projections, then twisted my concerns about unrealistic growth targets into something that sounded like I was leaking confidential data to competitors. He pulled out his phone and showed me a split-screen audio editing program. Bradley's not even particularly skilled at editing. "Listen to this." The recording played my former colleague's voice discussing normal financial projections, then jumped awkwardly to a phrase about sharing the numbers clearly taken from a different context and spliced to sound incriminating. "He did this to at least 7 people that I know of," Marcus continued. "Always the same pattern. Target someone with influence or expertise that threatened him, create manufactured evidence of disloyalty or incompetence, present it to HR, or his father depending on the person's level." "Why didn't anyone report him?" I asked. Who would believe us against the CEO's son? And there was always just enough truth in the recordings to make them plausible, if taken out of context. Sarah actually did have concerns about the digital strategy. I did think some financial projections were unrealistic. He manipulated those normal professional opinions into something that sounded fireable. Over the next week, Marcus and I worked together to document the pattern, connecting with other former employees who had experienced similar manipulation. With Jessica's cooperation, we presented a comprehensive report to Lawrence Anderson and the head of Human Resources, complete with examples of original recordings and Bradley's edited versions. The internal investigation expanded rapidly, revealing the full extent of Bradley's systematic elimination of perceived threats to his authority. Lawrence Anderson, to his credit, faced the situation with the integrity that had built his company's reputation. Rather than attempting to protect his son or minimize the damage, he addressed it head-on. Bradley was removed from his position permanently. An official company-wide email acknowledged serious violations of ethical standards and company policy without naming him directly. More importantly, Lawrence personally reached out to former employees who had been targeted, offering apologies and, in several cases, opportunities to return to the company. Sarah Thompson accepted such an offer, returning to lead the digital department with expanded authority. Marcus declined to return, but accepted a consulting role, helping to strengthen ethical oversight of management practices. 3 other wrongfully terminated employees rejoined the company in various capacities. For me, the resolution came in the form of a promotion to creative director with full responsibility for the luxury electric vehicle campaign. The client responded enthusiastically to my strategy, and the launch exceeded all performance metrics, becoming a case study in effective luxury marketing for sustainable products. Beyond professional advancement, however, the experience transformed my relationship with workplace dynamics. The initial weeks after Bradley's removal were challenging. I found myself questioning colleagues' motives, doubting casual conversations, and reviewing emails multiple times before sending them. The hypervigilance that had protected me during that crucial meeting lingered like muscle memory. Working through these trust issues became a personal journey. I connected with a career coach who specialized in workplace trauma learning techniques to distinguish between healthy professional caution and paranoid hypervigilance. Gradually, I rebuilt my confidence in my judgment and my ability to navigate complex professional relationships. The experience also connected me with an unexpected community. Other employees who had faced similar manipulation, whether from Bradley or in previous work environments, began seeking me out for guidance and support. What began as informal conversations evolved into a mentorship program focused on combating toxic workplace behaviors and building ethical professional resilience. With Lawrence Anderson's support, I developed a series of workshops on recognizing manipulation and maintaining professional boundaries without compromising creativity or collaboration. These sessions became mandatory for all management-level employees and optional for others, with surprisingly high voluntary attendance. The company itself underwent a transformation. Lawrence implemented significant changes to prevent similar situations in the future. Regular town halls provided direct access to senior leadership, bypassing potential gatekeepers. An anonymous reporting system allowed employees to raise ethical concerns without fear of retaliation. Most significantly, a cultural shift prioritized transparency and psychological safety alongside creative excellence and client service. 6 months after that fateful meeting, I sat in my new office, reviewing applications for a senior designer position when Sarah Thompson stopped by. "Have you seen this?" she asked, placing a trade publication on my desk. The headline read, "Anderson and Burke leads industry in employee retention and satisfaction following cultural renovation. Lawrence wants you to present on our cultural transformation at the industry conference next month," Sarah continued. "From nearly getting set up for termination to representing the company on stage. Not a bad turnaround." I laughed, the sound free from the tension that had colored the months following Bradley's departure. Life comes at you fast. Speaking of which, Sarah lowered her voice. Conspiratorially worded as Bradley tried the same recording tricks at his new firm. Got caught within 2 weeks. Apparently they had been warned by an anonymous former colleague. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, remembering the email I had sent to their HR department shortly after Bradley's departure from Anderson and Burke. Some lessons needed to be shared beyond company walls. Looking back now, I recognize that moment in Bradley's office as a professional crucible that ultimately strengthened not just my career, but my character. I learned that sometimes the most important professional skill isn't what you know or who you know, but knowing when to stand your ground and how to do so strategically. The experience taught me that integrity isn't just an abstract value, but a practical advantage in navigating complex workplace dynamics. It showed me the power of unexpected allies and the importance of extending that allyship to others facing similar challenges. Most importantly, it demonstrated that positive change often begins with one person refusing to be manipulated, even when doing so carries significant risk. If you have ever faced a similar situation where someone in power tried to manipulate or undermine you, I would love to hear your story in the comments. How did you handle it? What strategies helped you navigate the situation? And if you are currently dealing with a toxic workplace dynamic, remember that you are not alone, and there are always more options than just fight or flight. Sometimes the most powerful response is to change the rules of engagement entirely. Thank you for joining me for this story. If it resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might benefit from knowing they're not alone in facing workplace manipulation. Remember, your worth is not determined by those who try to diminish you, but by your courage in staying true to your values, even under pressure.